here in our newsroom, Browne, political analyst. Thanks for being with us.
Great to be here.
So, I mean, first of all, a lot of people expected fireworks. We didn't get that, Brian.
No, we didn't.
What are your thoughts on the meeting today?
I thought the meeting was going to be cordial. I did not expect this budding bromance that we saw unfold before our eyes.
That's a way to describe it.
Well, if politics was a dating app, I mean, they'd be swiping right on each other by now because, I mean, it was really remarkable to see the camaraderie. You know, there were times where President Trump literally rescued Zohran from some tough questions. So it was really interesting to watch.
It's interesting, especially if you've been following this and kind of the dialogue, I mean, that from both sides, right? So I think those who supported Mamdani up to now, who continue to support him, they were kind of watching this and maybe a touch surprised. What are your thoughts on that?
I think everyone was surprised,
Yeah.
but I also think it's a good opportunity to step back because so much of our politics is winners and losers and who
Right.
won the day and who won the moment. And you're even seeing that language. Who bent the knee, who kissed the ring after the meeting. But what you really saw was two gentlemen who have a shared interest in a great New York City, you know, the most important city in the world.
Right.
And they wanted to do better. So, you know, for me watching it, I saw this is politics where we say politics is the art of the possible.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, that's nice thinking, and we know things change in real time, and Trump time is far different, so by tomorrow morning,
Yeah.
we might be having a different conversation.
Right.
But it did show two people who have an ability to make a difference in the lives of 8 million people, and can they do it together? We'll see.
You know, yeah, so this is unusual in that Mamdani isn't mayor yet, right? So
Correct.
usually we'd see the mayor of New York City possibly go to the White House after taking the position, taking the post, taking the office, so to
Yes.
speak, right? Can you kind of give us some insight into that particular part of this? Although I think everyone agrees that it was extremely important, but a little unusual.
Well, it was a very important meeting to have, and mayors do go down to Washington and get to know the president, mayors-elect. You know, 4 years ago, Mayor Adams left the White House, and he was touting himself as the Biden of Brooklyn. I'm not sure if Zohran is going to come out and say he's, you know, a MAGA Mamdani or anything like that, but it is important to have that relationship between the White House and City Hall. It's important, in particular for Trump, because he's a native New Yorker. So I think what you saw was a good first step. But we know, I mean, the campaign rhetoric was heated all summer. Zohran was made out to be something that was very different from what we saw today and what will win the day.
You're right. So the president, as you mentioned, from New York City, often says how much he loves New York City. And he did kind of echo that sentiment today at the White House, kind of saying that he's willing to work with Mamdani. And that's what we want, right? We want cooperation across political lines, local and federal. I mean, that's local, state, and federal, actually. That's what makes things smooth. It doesn't always turn out that way. But we did hear that, and we heard equal cooperation, I think, from Mamdani. I do think that, you know, the whole thing was very professional and kind of eventless if you expected it to be explosive.
True.
Yeah.
True, but to your point, it is important to have that relationship. There will be time for governing and there will be time for politics. Today was a time for getting to know each other. There will be conversations on the road about law enforcement,
Right.
about capital projects that have been canceled by the Trump administration. Can we get federal funding back? So there'll be time for that. Today was a get to know you. It was literally the first time they met each other in person.
Right.
You get caught up in the trappings of the White House and the Oval Office. I'm sure that played a part. But what you have really, despite their ideological differences, they really have a lot in common.
Yeah.
They're both children of privilege. They're both well educated. They're both very articulate speakers and great communicators. They both disrupted their own party apparatus. So when you peel away the differences, you know, at the core, they have a lot in common. And I
Right.
think you saw that today.
And they have so much in common through the lens of New York City. As we mentioned, the president, originally from New York City, always talking about how much he loves
Two Queens
the city.
people. I thought
Yeah.
Zohran, if it's a true story, it was a shrewd move, I thought, to mention the pharmacist on Hillside Avenue that remembered servicing Donald Trump's father, you know, who was a customer. You know, he certainly made it, all politics is local, and he took it right to Hillside Avenue. We know there's a real difference between Donald Trump's side of Hillside Avenue and some other parts, but it did show a commonality.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a good move on Zohran's part to kind of play that emotional card.
So from local to national, also to international,
Correct.
right? So New York City, let's be honest, internationally, when people look at the United States, they're looking at New York City. President Trump, obviously known around the world long before even his first 4 years at the White House, and of course even more so now. Mamdani, interesting, really the world didn't know him. Even locally, a lot of people didn't know him until the election. And we saw him kind of really pop up in dialogue, not just locally, not just nationally, but internationally.
Correct. And you know, the mayor of New York City is often called the second hardest job in America after being after president of the United States. So you saw those two dynamics at play. It will be interesting because, you know, Zohran, you know, he's a great case study for an immigrant who comes to this country, becomes mayor of the largest city in America, you know, and he can have that part of his biography that's always going to be there. But to your point, you know, does he stick to local matters? Does it become more of an international thing? You know, the mayor of New York City, you know, by job description doesn't get involved in a lot of global affairs, but I think Zohran will, and he already has in the campaign. And what does that look like, and how does that conflict with the White House and their agenda? Yeah,
and we're going to continue to follow this here at Fox 5, of course, but you know, some things that they said they talked about today are things that we really saw throughout Mamdani's campaign: affordable housing, the cost of groceries, the cost of utilities, and the sentiment from President Trump, just kind of looking at it overall, not quoting here, but you know, we're going to support you. I'm going to support you. I want New York City to be better. We got to do what it takes. Good news for New Yorkers and Americans. I mean, that's the kind of cooperation we really want to see, and that we haven't really seen on a wide scale lately when it comes to politics.
No, we haven't. It'd be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah.
I mean, Zohran literally started his campaign right after President Trump was reelected, talking to Trump voters up in the Bronx. And I was raised in the Oval Office today. So certainly, you know, they do have this affordability message that they shared in common. How do they get there? You know, how does that conflict with some of the rhetoric that we saw on the campaign trail from Zohran, and particularly taxing the rich and raising taxes, and what does that mean? Because we know New York City is driven by a lot of it, corporate America and corporate taxes, and how does that conflict with the White House's agenda? And we also know looming large in 2026 is the midterm elections.
100%. And as we look at kind of how we started this conversation this evening, you know, why did a lot of people expect it to be more explosive? Mamdani, self-described socialist, really aligned with socialist ideals. We've heard the president come out, right, and call him a communist. But on the other side of this, Mamdani has been really, really vocal about this concept of what we are, New York City. We are a city of immigrants.
Correct.
And we know that the administration has been very aggressive and taken a totally different stance on immigration than we saw under the Biden administration. So we've seen polarizing ideals and a little snip, but none of that today.
No, and I think when it was raised, apparently in the discussion, they talked about going after the bad guys, and you know, they didn't really quite define what that means. But you could think it's more the criminal element as opposed to, you know, others. But I think what struck me, one of the many things that struck me, is Trump likes winners, and I think he likes to surround himself with winners. And right now, Zohran is a winner. So you know, power gravitates to other power.
You know, I think, of course, we continue to follow this here at Fox 5, yourself as a political analyst, but I think today was a good day for New York City and for the country to see this type of camaraderie. It really was, I think,
for overall. A moment, the volume was turned down.
There you go. That's a good way to describe it.
Absolutely, and I think that's much needed in our politics. Again, where do we go from here? We'll see. But, you know, I think it demonstrated that there is a place for governing, there is a place for politicking, and you can do both. You could do it in a civil manner. What happens tomorrow, we'll see. We'll get there. But I think today was a good first step.
I like your volume down analogy because, I mean, we look at so many things that New Yorkers and Americans have been worried about. Affordability. I mean, that's not just a New York issue, right? It's a national issue.
Absolutely.
That government shutdown had a lot of people stressed out. A lot of workers still recovering from that, you know, those workers that weren't getting paid. So I think, yeah, it was a volume down moment. We can have explosive headline every time we're looking at the news or reading the news,
and
right?
we need federal dollars. We need those federal dollars funding programs here in New York City that service those 8 million New Yorkers.
That's why the cooperation is so important. It's about the betterment of the city overall. And I think we saw leadership from Mamdani today.
I think we did, and again, they're two very articulate, polished, generationally different, ideological divide, absolutely, but at the end of the day, they're two very good communicators, and it'll be interesting to see how their base interprets it. You know, does Zohran lose friends amongst the DSA because, you know, perhaps they thought he was too nice to President Trump? Does Trump lose MAGA voters over this? So it'll be interesting to see how the party base reacts, but there'll be time for that.
Browne, political analyst, thanks for being with us here.
Pleasure.